Australia's future, it's up to you. History of political lying. None better than the LNP. No GST, never, ever.
No way that GST will ever be part of our policy.
Never ever.
Never ever, it's dead.
The calculated lie that divided Australians.
On the horizon, a dot. A Norwegian ship that had answered a call from Australian Rescue. When the captain changed course, the Australians radioed and threatened to seize his ship and put him in prison. The order had come from the very top. This ship, the Tampa, would not be allowed to land.
We will decide who comes to this country and the circumstances in which they come.
That night triggered one of the most dramatic moments in our history, when Australia stopped the boats.
The Australian people didn't want their government to look as though it was being pushed around.
Rarely have we felt so strongly about our politics, but rarely have we known so little about what was actually happening out on the ocean.
The Australian public knew what they were told and what they were allowed to see.
This is the story, told by the men and women who were there.
Our job was to go out there and stop any immediate threat to our country.
I mean, what is a sovereign government if you can't decide who's going to come in and who's not?
It's the story of one of the most famous victories in Australian politics.
Oh, it's total chaos, and in this chaos there was opportunity.
Elsewhere, behind razor wire, in remote detention facilities, Australia's most recent wave of refugees looked on. Like those who had come before, many were fleeing. The Taliban in Afghanistan, Saddam Hussein in Iraq. But these people hadn't been chosen for a refugee visa. They had just come by boat.
I was never afraid to have this debate. People want governments to represent them occasionally and to actually express how they feel, and providing their feelings are honourable, governments should try and express community feeling.
I understood absolutely from the beginning that there was a potential here for this to go haywire.
If they're going to come here illegally, what will they do after they get here?
You hear it and you know that will work for a politician.
If only there were a way to put these illegal immigrants back to the end of the queue.
I don't like illegal immigrants coming here and queue jumping.
The rest of the world must think Australia is a very easy touch.
We are not an easy touch.
But some basic facts were being left out of the loop. In Afghanistan or Iraq, there was no Australian embassy. The idea of a queue was a fantasy. And the people on the boats were not illegals. Australia's laws gave them the right to seek asylum here. And then there was the most basic fact of all, the numbers.
In defence, wasn't a big deal, because these numbers of people were very, very small, and that's why they didn't represent a security threat.
We don't actually remember that most of our illegal immigration takes place at our airports.
It was the news story of the particular time that we're in. And you can drive anything to hysteria by beating it up enough.
In the lead up to election, they were speaking about a lot. And, a lot of them were saying this, I think, could be very helpful to us.
Yeah, I think it has to be described as a moral panic.
The Tampa was the beginning of the turning point. The only thing to do was to take a stand.
The captain of the Tampa had no idea of the political minefield he had sailed into. He'd rescued 433 people at Australia's request, only to be told he mustn't land them. So he waited just off Christmas Island for morning.
I'm not used to politics, and been in Siemens all my life, and I'm not used to that. We don't like to be involved in the refugee problems. So that's why we call them only people we rescue from the sea. We had 10 people unconscious, going in and out of coma. That was the only thing I was asking for all the time, medical assistance. But nothing turns up.
Still no help came. Now the Norwegian captain had had enough.
We entered the Australian waters to get a reaction.
The government's reaction was instant.
The SAS is the shortest noticed, most highly capable in extremis force that the government has at its disposal to apply to a counter-terrorist role.
Peter Tinley was second in command of the SAS counter-terrorism squad.
The mission was to board the Tampa and, on command, stop it.
Just running towards us with the guns and saying that don't move. If anybody moves, we'll shoot.
When I was talking to the guys when they came back off the boarding party, I said, how did you find the group? And he said, well, they're a bunch of refugees. But I can't help but feel that the Prime Minister, John Howard, viewed the SAS as something that would resonate politically to the message of border security. You can't amp it up more in the public's mind than saying, we're going to send in the SAS, we'll show you how tough we are on border security.
Calculated move by the government to scare the pants off Australians.
Mr. No Cuts. Education, health, pensions, GST, ABC SBS.
Everyone actually listened to what Joe Hockey has said last week and again this week. No cuts to education, no cuts to health, no change to pensions, no change to the GST, and no cuts to the ABC or SBS.
ABC 2013 to 2015. 200 plus lost their jobs and hundreds more are still on the chopping block. Regional radio stations have been shut down, hardly any opposition from National Party. ABC's drama and kids content has been slashed. Production facilities have been shut down, including the closure of television production facilities in Adelaide. Abbott deceives the nation. 65 porky pies in 2 years. Even on his political deathbed, Tony Abbott could not tell the truth. LNP mantra. Jobs, jobs, jobs. How many government jobs has the LNP created? None. 21,400 public service staff lost since 2013. Difficult to find accurate data, but Australian public service employees in the Defence Department equals 17,400, but they also employ 28,600 contractors. LNP relying more on contractors and in the process losing years of expertise. Pensioners. Do you want your pension managed for you?
Whether there is a conversation that the Australian public would like to have about the broadening of the use of the card.
Well, given that success, does the government intend to roll this out nationally and make it compulsory for all welfare recipients?
Well, I think the conversation that we need to have is about the value of the card, the advantages of the card. The new technology has been a real game changer in the ability for the card to actually provide additional value to participants. I think initially there was a very strong view that the card was around dealing with gambling, alcohol and drug-related social harm in community. But what we've seen with the change in technology is it actually has become a financial budgeting tool so that people on low incomes can manage their budget, by making sure, like as in the case of Nicole, her payments for her car come out of her payment, her cashless debit card every fortnight. So what we're seeking to do is to say to the people, whilst there is the benefit of social harm reduction that we're hoping will continue, there is a broader application for the whole community and something that we would like to have a conversation with them about.
So do you plan to make it compulsory at some point?
Well, I'm not going to preempt that. I think this is the start of a consultation. I mean, we've run a number of trial sites. We're seeking, as I said, to put all income management onto the universal platform, which is the cashless debit card.
Dossier of lies and falsehoods. How Scott Morrison manipulates the truth. Crikey have documented a dossier of 29 lies and falsehoods. Without truth, no democracy can stand. Anti-terror laws 2001 to 2019. Total passed, 82. In progress September 2019, 6. Since the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks in the United States, the Australian Parliament has responded to the threat of terrorism here and overseas by enacting dozens of new laws, or amending existing laws. The LNP government said. These laws were needed to protect Australians from threats of terrorism. We now know that was mostly lies. Misuse of draconian laws predicted. These same laws are now being used to silence and intimidate anyone who exposes government wrongdoing. Silencing critics of government using these powers is a gross abuse of power. Freedom of speech. It depends who you are.
We support free speech. That's a significant liberal principle.
Freedom of speech is fundamental to our society.
Australia's a free country. There's such a thing as freedom of speech in this country, and that will continue.
Freedom of speech, unless you're David McBride, Witness K, Bernard Collaery, Jordan Shanks, Christo Lanka, Shane Barzi, Ben Pennings, John Menadue, Susie Kong, James Lawrenson, Marcus Rubenstein, yours truly. Freedom of speech, unless you're a critic of the government. Freedom of speech, unless you're a journalist doing their job. Last week, Friendly Geordie's producer, the 21-year-old Christo Lanka, was arrested by counter-terrorism police at his home. His mother was knocked over. Lanka's been charged with a criminal act, the act of stalking against New South Wales Deputy Premier John Barilaro. Now, this is clearly a politically motivated action. You can watch the 2 videos yourself of these alleged incidents of stalking, and you can see that it's a huge overreach of government power. It's reverse terrorism, if you like. If the definition of terrorism is threatening people for political reasons, this is the government threatening people for political reasons.
Australia is struggling with a political confidence crisis. More than half of us think that corruption is commonplace. We don't trust our politicians to do the right thing by us. We are strongly of the view that they should resign if they lie. When are we going to stop voting for politicians who lie? Surely it is time we, the people, demanded honesty from our politicians. Enough is enough. You have a responsibility. It is an abdication of your responsibility to refuse to be responsible for what our political leaders are doing in our name, and not calling them out or holding them to account. You. Your community. Your world. Australia's future. It's up to you. Our model of democracy is failing us. We fail democracy when not actively engaging with it. Vote wisely. Connect with like-minded people who are committed to positive change. Join our group at Australia's Future, It's Up to You. References for video, in description below.